Hi everyone, welcome to our first session of Discovering Co-op Careers. Our first guest is Sophie Beresford, who is here to talk to us about the Co-op Foundation. So I will hand over to Sophie.
Thank you very much. So yes, as just said, I am Sophie Beresford. I am the campaign manager for the Co-op Foundation. So for anybody that doesn't know who the Co-op Foundation is, I'm sure we'll get a nice little bit of promo when Co-op Live launches, given that we will be receiving a large donation every year from Co-op Live, but we are a unrestricted funder, so we fund and campaign to help build communities of the future which are fairer and more cooperative. So we have the funding team, and then we have our campaigns team, which is the one that I manage. So that's where a lot of our funding goes towards, is those two areas. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about my team, which is the comms and campaigns team. We sit within one at the moment. One thing I should say is that there's going to be somebody missing from here, which is the head of comms and campaigns. And the reason for that is because they started today. So we do have a manager, but I obviously couldn't provide information about somebody that I haven't met as of yet. But there is another person, her name's Laura Evans, and she starts today. So you might see that name circulating in the future in connection to the Co-op Foundation. So if you don't mind going on to the next, am I controlling the slides? No, fab. So yeah, as I said, I'm a campaign manager, so I'm responsible for delivering our campaign strategy, which I wrote last year. I'm also helping to build a new campaign function. So the way that we campaign is changing. Some of you might be familiar with the Co-op Foundation and our work around loneliness. So I previously managed the Alone Not Alone campaign, only for the last 2 years of its life. So I don't want to take full credit for the campaign as a whole. It was very much my previous manager, Andy's baby. So I won't take all of the credit from all the hard work that he did to make the campaign what it is today. But it was a youth-led campaign, and that was very much kind of an in-house model. It was behaviour change, and it was all around tackling the stigma of youth loneliness. We are changing slightly and pivoting when it comes to how we campaign, looking at more partnership work, but hopefully you'll find out a little bit more about that in the future. I can't say too much at the moment. But a lot of the campaign work that I do involves managing partnerships, so a lot of stakeholder management. It's obviously my responsibility to promote the campaign work that we're doing, so just to make people aware of the fact that we are a campaigning foundation and how we want to make a difference in communities to make them fairer and more cooperative. And there's a lot of risk management as well when it comes to managing campaigns, because the kind of social political climate can change quite a lot, so it's just managing that as well. In terms of my hobbies and interests, so I love outside of work, I am a mental health and wellbeing blogger, which I think helps as well with my campaign work, because I keep an eye on sort of what's going on when it comes to the current state of mental health services and the decisions that are being made by the government and all that sort of stuff. So I think that really feeds into that. So a lot of writing. Blogging obviously involves a lot of writing, which I think really helps with my day-to-day role, which also involves a lot of writing. Love reading everything, non-fiction, fiction, any opportunity to read, and I am a very, very happy bunny. Love a documentary. Always up for a recommendation, so please do let me know if you've got one. I've just finished a historical one and I really, really enjoyed it, because history is also a particular interest of mine. Love gigs, works really well with Co-op Live, so I'll be their biggest fangirl. And then any kind of cultural and creative events. So I live in Manchester. There's always a lot going on in that department. So any opportunity to go to any events, whether it's an art exhibition or it could be a talk on a particular sort of social subject, I really like going along, especially ones where it's interactive, you can get involved. You'll see me and Hannah aren't hugely different, which is why we're also very good friends, because her interests are very similar to mine. So she also loved reading, watching films and TV, going to art exhibitions, going to gigs. We are very, very similar in that sense. And Hannah is our corporate communications officer. So what that role sort of involves is Hannah is responsible for promoting and maintaining the foundation's brand, and finding opportunities for us to highlight what we're doing as an organisation as a whole. So she's very heavily involved at the moment in Co-op Live, what's going on in terms of what our brand looks like, how we talk about our involvement in Co-op Live, how we benefit from the gigs that give back model. She's also responsible for managing all of our social media channels, our website, and managing the internal comms for the team as a whole. So lots of different things. Trying to summarise what Hannah does in a nutshell was quite difficult, actually. So a woman with many, many hats. Syra is our funding and partnerships comms officer. So Syra focuses on our funding and partnerships team, supporting them and helping to promote the work we are doing with partners. So you might have heard of the wide range of different things we do. We have a wide range of different funds aiming to help us deliver on our vision and our strategy. And a lot of our work is youth focused. That's because we've always been heavily involved. I suppose you could see that through Loan Not Alone. We're working with young people and understanding the issues that they're facing and trying to find solutions that help them to help improve communities. And obviously with them being the kind of the future leaders, future pioneers, we understand that the future communities are what they will inherit. So that's why we're working with them to improve them now so that they can benefit from them in the future. Our strategy and vision was also created by working with young people. So the vision, for example, that you'll see on our website was created with 100 diverse young people telling us what they thought future fairer and more cooperative communities look like. And that is the vision that we now use to direct our work today. In terms of hobbies and interests, wouldn't say Syra's are hugely different either. There's definitely a theme. So Syra really enjoys reading, staying up to date with politics and social justice issues. She does quite a few volunteering roles. She's also a trustee as well. And Syra has a background in theatre communications. So that's why obviously theatre is very much one of her great loves. And then we've got Em. So Em is the Co-op Foundation team coordinator. So she looks after does coordination for the whole of the foundation team, and she's responsible for supporting our team. So she doesn't solely work with us. She's kind of split between the comms team and supporting the F&P team and sort of our charity as a whole. And in terms of how she supports us, she mainly helps to support the management of our social media channel, so very much supporting Hannah, and then there'll be a few other pieces as well that she will support with, so our upcoming impact report, for example. So even though she's kind of split between the two teams, she's an extra pair of hands and a huge support to us, so we really appreciate having her on board. And in terms of hobbies and interests, organising all aspects of her life is something that she, when we were talking about it, she really, really enjoys, and you would know because she's an excellent organiser. She loves meeting new people at social events, and I know this is something that she started doing in Manchester recently, walking and listening to podcasts. So you can kind of see some themes when it comes to what we all like to do. I think the two main things that have kind of come out is the fact that we love reading and we love writing, because comms, unsurprisingly, involves a lot of writing. So you have to have a passion for writing. So yeah, that's the team in a nutshell, and obviously provided some pictures so you've got a slight vision of what we look like as well. On the next page, so I'm going to talk through the top 3. This was quite difficult, actually. The top 3 behaviours of working in comms and campaigns. So one thing I should say in advance is that comms and campaigns sit together, but my role, you'll see, is ever so slightly different in that it does involve a bit of comms, but also mine is different in the sense that it can vary quite a bit when it comes to looking, trying to stay up to date with public affairs, which is slightly different to being part of the comms team. So for example, I will need to have a basic knowledge of how public affairs works if we're going to be working with organisations that look to influence government policy. To be able to support them meaningfully, I need to have that understanding, but you don't need that necessarily for the rest of the comms team, if that makes sense. And you don't need that as a kind of as any sort of knowledge, I suppose, if you were looking to go into comms. So I just want to make that clear, and I'll kind of build on that as we go through. So the 3 behaviours that I managed to decide on, and I got sign off from the team, was, so creativity is hugely important. I think when we think of creativity, often people think of jobs like, you know, anything that's art-based, design, anything like that. That's often what people think creativity is. And I loved being creative. I used to do a lot of art and a lot of painting. And when I was looking for a career, I knew I didn't want to necessarily be drawing. I've always thought I was a very creative person, but I didn't necessarily want to be an artist or a designer or anything like that. But I knew that the job that I wanted to do would have to be creative. And that's one thing I love about working in comms and campaigns, is that it gives me an opportunity to be creative, but maybe not in the traditional way that we think about creativity. So what I mean by being creative is you have to come up with new ideas when it comes to communicating with your audiences. So there, as we all know, whether you work in comms marketing or anything like that, you don't need to work in those areas to know that there are always new platforms popping up, and there are always new updates on each of them. So you are constantly trying to think of ways of how can we communicate with our audiences in a creative way, in a way that makes them, in a social media sense, stop on their newsfeed to look at our content, all that sort of stuff. So you need to be, you need to have quite a creative mind to come up with ideas. Obviously, content creation for social media, that takes an element of creativity as well. Thankfully, there's platforms now like Canva where they give you a little bit more inspiration than you used to have, but also you need a kind of an idea as to what you want to create and have a good eye to be able to create something that, as I say, is impactful and will engage your audience. Needing to stay relevant and standing out from your competitors. So what I mean by this is, especially working in the charity sector, people aren't getting anything physical in return for donating or supporting you necessarily. So I used to work for Macmillan Cancer Support, who are obviously a huge charity that relies primarily, and I think it was, well, wouldn't quote me exactly on this because it might have changed because I obviously left a couple of years ago, but I think it's around 97% of the income was fundraised. People aren't getting something necessarily physical for that interaction, so you've got to try and convince people that your money should be going, that their money should be going to you and not somebody else. And I know it's a weird to say competitor. I don't mean that as in, you know, charities don't collaborate or cooperate in any way. It's just that you need to try and stand out from the crowd when you're trying to raise money. And even though a foundation like ours works slightly differently, so we don't rely on fundraising in the same way that an organisation like Macmillan, that's a 97% fundraising income sort of relies on money, we still want to be able to stand out from the crowd, because there are so many foundations, funders and charities in the UK, and we kind of want to prove, you know, how we're making a difference. So that's also, you have to be quite creative in how you stand out from the crowd. And then also for problem solving. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit when we talk about how we're adaptable, but comms can be a problem solving role. And there's lots of reasons why that can happen, but some things can come up at the last minute, and then you have to be flexible in terms of how you are going to communicate the information that you want to. So I also think there's a creative element to that as well when it comes to, I think problem solving is a lot more creative than we believe it is. I think people think it's a understandably, there's a logical process, but I think also you have to have quite a creative mind as well when it comes to overcoming any obstacles. So, and then in terms of being adaptable, everything, as I've said here, doesn't always go to plan. So you can prepare as much as possible, and then you can turn up on the day and something can happen. So you sometimes have to deal with last minute alterations, sometimes a change of date. Really anything can happen, and I know that that can affect a wide range of different departments, but in comms it is sadly a regular occurrence, especially when you're working the media. I'd say that when you're doing PR, which is what I have done in previous roles and focused on heavily in previous roles, the media can change overnight. I think we all know that. There can be a breaking news story, and then your piece just can't go out that day because you will get no coverage whatsoever. And obviously the whole point of putting out any PR, so press releases or having a segment on the radio station and having an interview, is that you want to get some cut through and you want people to understand what it is, the kind of key messaging that you're putting across. So if you can't do that, then you've kind of lost your opportunity. So sometimes you can lose opportunities, or you have to look at rearranging. So that can be quite challenging as well. Or somebody, for example, that you had as spokesperson might not be available for whatever reason, and then you've got to be adaptable. So lots of different moving parts for comms, and you've got to be prepared to create and find solutions for those. Sign off can also be really challenging, especially when you've got a lot of people involved. So we work with a lot of different partners trying to get that signed off when you've got quite a few different people wanting to input, and trying to manage people's expectations and all that sort of stuff can be quite hard to manage, but that is a big part of the role as well. So sign off can be, obviously because there's a deadline, that can be quite challenging, but it's something that we help to manage and have to, as I say, be flexible when it comes to managing people's expectations. And perhaps unsurprisingly, communication is really important. And I don't mean that, I mean that in all sorts of senses, because it's really essential, really important for not only stakeholder management, whether that's with partners that we fund, those that we collaborate with, our own team, working obviously alongside Co-op as their charity, but also through project management as well, if you're project managing a piece of work. So for me, that as a previous example would have been Lonely Not Alone, making sure that the young people that we worked with to help design the campaign, they very much understood what we were trying to achieve that year, where we were at, keeping them involved, keeping them informed, keeping the stakeholders that we have within the Co-op itself informed on what we were doing, what they could expect next. You then got your, foundation, the team, ourselves. We're a bigger team than we used to be, but we are, in the grand scheme of things, still considered quite a small team for a charity. But yeah, you've got to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that people have enough time to raise any concerns and issues, because once you've gone out with something publicly, you can't really take it back without it being a reputational risk. So trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page is really important. Communication is also really important when it comes to preventing any delays when you're working to a really strict deadline. So that's another key piece that is involved in our work day to day. And as you can see, these are kind of all feeding into each other, because if you have really good communication, you can then help improve the sign-off process, which obviously we've just talked about under the sort of adaptability behaviour. And also communication is really important to be able to build good trusting relationships. So whether that's with people internally, which is really important to be able to work with your team effectively, but also externally, each of us are a representation of the foundation as a whole, and we want people to see us as a trusted funder. And to be able to do that, we need to be able to harness that and emulate that through what we're doing as well. So yeah, they're the three behaviours I'd say are the most important for working in comms and campaigns, specifically for the foundation and other sort of charitable work. I think the next one is skills, potentially. Lots of skills, but hopefully I've potentially sort of mentioned them already. So in terms of soft skills, we talked about problem solving, obviously, and the teamwork element I feel came through on the behaviour slide, along with communication, creativity, flexibility. The reason that I've put emotional intelligence is because a lot of work in our area, so Cyra's work, for example, she is helping the funding and partnerships team to help promote their work. One of the organisations that we support financially through grants is Refugee Action. So Cyra will go and meet with the organisation along with one of our funded partners, and I know that they did this recently, and will write a what is called a case study, which sometimes feels a little bit corporate, but it's basically trying to capture somebody's story and the impact that the organisation has had on them. So in this case, it'll be Refugee Action, and looking at how the money that we provided has helped people that they support. So the reason I say that you need to have some emotional intelligence is sometimes you're dealing with very vulnerable people. So as you can imagine, having worked for Macmillan Cancer Support, I was working a lot with people who had maybe lost a loved one to cancer and we're doing something in memory of them. It could be somebody that's been diagnosed with cancer, somebody that's just recovered from cancer. You know, there's a lot to manage in that sense, and you've got to be emotionally intelligent to be able to actively listen to their story and then write it up to be able to, as I say, highlight the impact that the charity is having on people's day-to-day lives. Time management, really important, and that was something that when I was pulling this together we all agreed. As you can see, that when you're working certain deadlines, it very much is like a bit like project management where you're working backwards and you've got to hit certain milestones to be able to deliver a piece of work on time. So that's that one. Good attention to detail. There's a lot of proofreading and editing when you work in comms. So you need to be able to spot things that other people potentially can't, and potentially look at rewriting things as well to make sure that the audience really understands what you're saying. I've put critical thinking because we have to obviously evaluate, like most areas of an organisation, whether charitable or not. We have to evaluate the impact of our work. So after every piece of work that we do, we will do an evaluation after to see the aims and objectives that we wanted. So whether that's, so for me with Lonely Not Alone, it was about driving people to the Lonely Not Alone website and getting young people to share their story or message of support to help other lonely young people. I would be looking at, you know, what was our target, what was the outcome, and then looking at, okay, if we didn't get as many young people to the page, what is the reason for that? How did our social media ads go? All that sort of stuff. Each of us do that in our own ways, and we learn from it, share it with the wider team. So there's quite a bit of critical thinking in that sense. Stakeholder management, as I've said, there's a lot of stakeholders often involved in our work. So having a good relationship with them and managing their expectations, building good relationships with them is really important. Storytelling kind of links back to what I was saying with the emotional intelligence. So it's our job to tell a story about the impact that we're having as an organisation and the people that we're helping. So it's our job to really bring that to life so that people can really understand what we're doing. So a lot of that, again, kind of comes back to creating visual content, writing as well. And then finally, public speaking. So this is a big part of my role, is slightly more than probably the other members of the team at the moment, but that's when I'm going out and talking a little bit more about our campaigning work. What's the impact that we're having? What's the difference that we're making? So that's a slight differentiation, I would say, between the comm side of things and the campaigning side of things, is that the comm side kind of speaks for itself, whereas the campaigning side, when we were focusing on loneliness, I was doing a lot of presentations at events or talks that were taking place about loneliness and what the foundation was doing, how we were trying to make a difference. So that's why I've obviously put that in there, and hopefully that helps people to understand what the difference between the main comms team and then my role is in that sense. Technical skills. So usually for jobs in communications, you need a degree or diploma in journalism, English or marketing. Sometimes that can change slightly, sometimes they want something else, but they tend to be the main things that they're looking for in those areas. Some experience in project management as well, which I think you can get in lots of different ways now. I think project management has become a really sort of useful set of skills to have across a wide range of different areas, both within the charity sector and outside. So that's another piece. Copywriting obviously is a huge part of our job, so having evidence and showing that you have skills when it comes to being able to write copy is really, really important, and is something that people would look for when it comes to wanting to be in a role in comms or campaigns. Talked about proofreading and editing, and being able to demonstrate that's really important. Social media. So I wouldn't say to work in comms, you don't have to be there's a difference between if you're a social media manager, you spend 24 hours a day solely focusing on social media, than there is if you're if you work in comms. And social media, yes, is a very important part of your job, and you need to have an understanding as to how it works, you know, how to set up ads and all that kind of stuff. But you don't need the kind of same level as somebody that's solely focusing on social media. So I don't want to underestimate the importance of understanding social media and how creating good content works in the management. But if you're focusing on social media full time, it is slightly different. But just to create that differentiation between the two. as I've sort of talked about, an understanding of public affairs, and that background is really important for my role. So I just wanted to put that in there to differentiate between the campaigns and the comm side. And then website management is important. A lot of people tend to use the same platforms now. So just understanding, you know, how you can manage that, how you can upload content is really important, because comms tend to be the ones that end up managing the website. If it's not comms, it's marketing, and sometimes people put comms and marketing together, so it finds its way back to us somehow. And then finally, case study writing, which is a little bit like storytelling as well. So I put a list here when it comes to how you can gain these skills. So the reason that I put the Chartered Institute of Public Relations at the top is because not only do they do actual diplomas in these various areas, often I think they are for a certain amount of money. I think it's between sort of £1,000 to £2,000, which I appreciate in this current sort of economic climate is quite a bit of money, but they do a lot of subjects that are related to communication. So it can be public relations, as you can see in their name. They do one on public affairs. I think they do one as well around marketing, so they're quite broad in that sense. If you are genuinely interested in comms, they are a great organisation to look into. Sometimes they do some webinars and things as well, so it's worth checking them out and seeing what they have available, because sometimes they have some free bits as well. The Digital Marketing Institute, again, they have some courses and there's webinars and certificates you can get through them. Girls in Marketing is really good for girls in marketing who are wanting to learn more. So I know that they do free meetups. They do quite a lot of free stuff, but they also, you can sign up for a membership, and then you can get access to a wide range of different courses. And I think you can also get certificates after that. But it's really helpful because all of their courses on there are really wide ranging if you just want to develop in certain areas or get a basic understanding. And then you've got some of the others, so Marketing Meetup, Marketing Meet, Charity Comms, Future Learn. And the one that I've put on there is blogging and freelance journalism. So the reason I've put that on there is because that is a big part of my history. You can start a blog tomorrow if you want to. Yeah, I know it sounds really intimidating, but you could set up. I got my first job from blogging, which was a site that I ran myself, and doing voluntary sort of written pieces for, I wanted to originally do fashion. So I was doing a lot of written pieces during university for free for other kind of fashion websites, just to build my portfolio. And you can still very much do that today. There's a lot of people always looking for people to contribute, sometimes paid, but I think when you first start, if you haven't got a portfolio to show, they're unlikely to give you money in exchange. But there's a lot of people who are wanting to build out their websites, who are looking for voluntary writers, and that is how I started building up my portfolio. So I thought it was really important to not underestimate blogging and freelance sort of journalism roles, because that will help you build a portfolio. If you think, I don't know how to prove that I'm good at copywriting, I don't know where to start, that helped me secure my first job alongside a lot of people who were full-time journalists. So don't underestimate the opportunity, a bit like internships, of doing something in your spare time. And I do think that my blog really helps me as well in my spare time, because it's taught me a lot about building a website myself. I've started doing, there was a period I was doing podcasts, so that's a skill I now have. I've started running events. There's so much I've gained from this outside of work, extra piece of work that anybody can do. I don't want to underestimate, the amount of hours that go into it, but anybody can start a blog. So that's why I thought it was really important to put that in there as well, to inspire the rest of you. I can't remember what the next slide is. Oh yes, so career paths. I'm just going to talk through these briefly. So the reason I put hospitality is because me and Hannah were talking about it, and I know a lot of us have probably, kind of one of our first jobs. A lot of us end up in hospitality, and me and Hannah were talking about the fact that hospitality taught us a lot about stakeholder management. And what I mean by that is sometimes you do have to deal with difficult people, and you have to manage their expectations and get to a stage where you're, giving them what they want, but also kind of balancing, respect for your colleagues and all that sort of stuff. So that's the reason I kept it in there because it might not seem relevant, but it's don't underestimate the importance of that job. I grew up in hospitality, so I could talk about the importance of hospitality every day because I think it's an industry that's looked down on far too much when actually you get a huge range of skills from it. So that's why we popped it in there. Journalism, so I've touched on that, really important, whether you're being paid for it or you're doing it as a voluntary piece. It's really helpful for getting you to understand how to write copy, how to edit your own copy, and understanding even the structure of a good written piece. So and also working with journalists, a huge part of PR is understanding how to create a story that journalists want to print. You can write whatever you want, but if you send it to a journalist and they're like, this, it doesn't catch their attention, they get sometimes hundreds, thousands of emails a day. You need to learn how to create something that really catches their eye and makes them want to print it. There's a lot of other people, you know, emailing them, so that in itself is a skill, and doing journalism gives you that insight into how the newsroom works. How can you position yourselves in a slightly different way to other people who are also sending journalist stories, because as I say, they're getting a lot, so you want to stand out. Hannah worked in a PR agency, so that was a lot around managing different organisations that they were supporting, different businesses. A lot of time management is needed for that because you've not just got one client, you've got multiple clients, and I think that's been really helpful when it comes to understanding people's different needs and how you're able to work to a specific deadline. Em worked in engagement analysis before within the Co-op, actually, so she was originally within the business and then she moved over to us, and the engagement analyst role was looking a bit like what I was saying about our evaluation, and is why Em helps with our KPIs, kind of helping us review the impact that we're having and, you know, where we're at in terms of whether we're meeting them or not. That's been really valuable for Em in that sense, as I'm sure you can understand. My role has mainly been in charity comms, so I think I'm the only one that's solely focused on charity comms. So I started off doing press for a hospice. That was my first job. Then I moved into Macmillan and I was there for 5.5 years. And now I'm obviously at the foundation. So I've only ever worked in the charity sector, and I think that's hugely valuable as somebody that continues to work in the charity sector, because it is different to doing more corporate based communications. So and then marketing as well. Marketing and comms often get lumped together, and they are slightly different. But and I think have you got somebody from marketing talking this week? Can't remember if you.
Yes, it's next Friday. So, performance marketing. Yeah,
so I'm going to let them talk about marketing, and you'll see the difference between the two. But they very much complement each other. So that's why Syra's background, she has a background in marketing, which has helped when it comes to thinking about marketing and comms as a whole and how they can work alongside each other. There's a lot of writing and creativity involved in marketing as well, but I will let my colleague talk a little bit more about that. And then internal comms, obviously that's what Hannah works in now, but during my time at Macmillan, I did 6 months in internal comms for them. I had quite a few different roles in Macmillan, but one of them was internal comms, and that can help when you're looking at comms as a whole. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as part of the final slide as well, because it's a good point that I always like to make when I'm talking about careers in comms. So that's slide for you. So finally, these are some golden nuggets of advice. So I'm going to start with mine because obviously it was written by me. And as I've said here, comms and campaigns is a broad area of work with lots of opportunities. So what I mean by that, and it very nicely ties in with what I've just finished on the other page in terms of internal comms, is that comms is so broad, as you can see between our roles. You've got, so campaigns can mean different things to different organisations, but you can have the campaigning side. So when I was at Macmillan, it actually meant something slightly different, campaigns. It meant working on things like coffee morning. So your role would be every year looking at how you're going to promote that particular product to people, or you can have fundraising communications. You can have the funding side, which is obviously what Syra focuses on. You've got the more corporate side, you've got internal comms. It is so broad. There are so many different opportunities to work in comms. From a science perspective, there's often researcher and kind of science based communication roles. Honestly, the list is endless. But the point I wanted to make here is that when I did my internal comms role, it was 6 months in that role, and as much as I've gained a lot from that experience, because now I think a lot about internal comms as well as external comms. So I think about the importance of doing the internal comms alongside external comms, whereas sometimes if you're in one or the other, you only sometimes think about that one. People can very much get into the mindset of only focusing on their area. But I think that having that kind of juxtaposition of those two roles has helped me wider in my career. I didn't really enjoy internal comms. That is no shade to anybody that works in internal comms. It just wasn't for me. I prefer the more external part of the job. And if I hadn't done that role for 6 months, I would never have known that. So internal comms would have always been a thought at the back of my mind of, oh, would I enjoy that? But I've done that now. I've dipped my toe in there. I've seen that, yes, external comms is for me. And even to this day, working in campaigns, this role is a slight shift from what I was doing at Macmillan, which was mainly focused on promoting the services, showing the impact that they were having, and a lot of fundraising communications. This role now, looking at, I never thought I would be in a role where I'm now having to understand the political system, and kind of looking at policy and campaigning in a more traditional sense than what we mean in kind of a communication sense. So that's why I would just, no opportunity is ever wasted. You learn something from everything, and it will help you in your career in some way in the future. So I just like to throw that out there for people, so that you are able to find an area of comms and campaigns that might work for you. Emily, as Emily said here, having confidence, good communication skills, and good listening skills and creativity. I think that's a really good summary of what it's like working in a comms team. Good listening skills as well, especially because you are often responsible for kind of summarising what we're hoping to achieve by the various pieces of work that you are doing, and understanding what stakeholders' needs are and bringing that to life. Cyrus said here, always think about who you're producing content for. Your audience is really important, and they are really important because that's who you're creating content for, and you kind of need to learn how to manage what you want to say and how they want to receive it. That can sometimes be, quite a difficult thing. That's usually a main challenge for a comms team. So understanding that in great detail is really important, and being audience led as well, which is something that we do as a comms team. Not every comms team do that, but that's something that we chose as part of our new strategy to do. And then Hannah has put here about open communication, which I think is really important. And what she means by that is it's all around just not being afraid to truly work as a team, and be really open and honest about whether you've been able to finish something on time. If you've got a question, just asking. I think a lot of people are often intimidated about asking questions, but actually it helps you get the job done so much quicker if you just ask the question that you need, rather than worrying in the background, trying to figure it out for yourself. And it reduces a lot of anxiety just asking a colleague an answer to a question which you then know the answer forevermore. I've seen so many colleagues get themselves into a right state thinking that they need to know the answer to a question when they could have just resolved it very quickly by asking. Because sometimes a question that you ask, the answer isn't as straightforward as you think it is. So yeah, it's really, really important, especially as Hannah says here, for open and honest relationships with colleagues and partners. So they're the little golden nuggets of advice we will leave you with, and happy to answer any questions anybody's got.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was amazing. Really interesting to hear about what the foundation do. We do have a question from Ashley. Given your existing professional experience in a communication-heavy position, to what extent do you think a directly relevant degree or diploma is necessary to be successful and be considered for jobs focusing on writing, communication, and marketing? Do you believe on-the-job experience can adequately substitute for a lack of formal education in those fields?
So my short answer to that is yes, because I've seen it firsthand. So when I was at Macmillan, the first thing I should say is, arguably this is down to the organisation, of course, but when I was at Macmillan, I'm hoping I'm not going to get anybody at Macmillan, in trouble for this, although I doubt I am. There was a member of my team who didn't have a degree in. As part of the application, it said that you needed to have a degree in the areas that I've just mentioned. And I learned, having worked with this person for 3-4 years, they didn't have a degree in that area. It's because it was all based on their experience. It was all their ability to have the same job as me was all based on their experience. Somehow they'd found themselves kind of in a marketing role. I think it was through they'd been interested in it, they were shadowing colleagues, so that's how they kind of got their experience, and then within the organisation that they worked for, they were able to kind of sidestep into marketing. So I think, you know, an organisation of our size, you know, if there are any opportunities to shadow another team or understand a little bit more about that team, or, you know, help out in some way, and gain the experience that way, I think that's hugely valuable as well. Because, you know, when I was doing my English degree, yes, it taught me a lot about writing, but a lot of other degrees involve a lot of writing, and anybody can have a passion for reading. You know, there's lots of things that you can play on. And as I said before, during the presentation, I think getting that experience now is also hugely valuable. I think nobody really asks me about my degree. They just see it as a kind of a tick box. But actually, sometimes I think if I had maybe done a history degree, for example, and I'd done my journalism along the side, the stuff that I was doing at university and continue to do through my blog, you can see firsthand, they're able to see my ability to write through those sort of opportunities. So yeah, I would say if you can provide some sort of portfolio, that's always good, and you might be able to get that in your current day job, or, as I say, find other opportunities that you can do in your spare time, because there's lots of opportunities for writing, and it's actually being able to evidence that so that somebody can see it as an example that's really important. So hopefully that answers that question.
If we have any more questions, if anyone thinks of anything after the session, please feel free to get in contact with me and I will ask Sophie. Please look out for the rest of our sessions throughout the week. We have colleagues from funeral care, insurance, property. They'll all be talking about their roles, and I think it'll be really interesting. And finally, a huge thank you to Sophie for kicking off National Careers Week in the most amazing way. And yeah, we will leave this here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone,
and thanks, Jess, for organising it.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks,
Take care.